If there's one garden plant that immediately upon seeing it conjures up romantic nostalgia, besides things like peonies and lilacs and also roses, then of course it has to be lavender. And this is a selected form of the so-called English lavender that I think was probably developed by Lawrence Johnson when he was growing his famous garden at Hidcote Manor in the Cotswolds. It wasn't unusual for gardeners of that time to select out particular clones of plants that had characteristics they wanted. Gertrude Jekyll was doing the same at our famous Munstead. She was selecting a form of lavender that had a particular colour and leaf colour that she liked. And I suspect Lawrence Johnson probably selected out this clone because it had those beautiful violet blue flowers. Now our plants here are nice, healthy young plants that, as you see, are covered with lots of buds that are about to pop out, and when they do, they'll have those glorious deep violet blue flowers that have a wonderful fragrance that bees and butterflies love to come and visit. And incidentally, it's kind of nice about lavender, it's got aromatic foliage that smells so good to us but isn't normally eaten by deer. So there's lots of reasons why we could be growing these in our garden. Wonderful kind of a shrub to grow in an elevated place like a raised bed or rockery, an herb garden, somewhere where you're able to enjoy both the fragrance and also aromatic foliage. And remember, or just note that I said elevated. That's kind of important because a lot of people have difficulty getting lavenders to grow. And if you fall into that category and you want a few tips as to how to grow them, let me tell you the important things. As I just mentioned, the first thing is to grow them in an elevated position. If you look at those pictures of the lavender fields in France, you look at it closely, you'll see they're all growing on elevated beds. That's important because lavender loves to have good drainage. In their native Mediterranean, they're called English lavenders. They don't come from England. They're just called English lavenders because they were widely grown there and made very popular growing in English gardens. But actually, this type, Lavandula angustifolia, is native to the Mediterranean. So think of the south of France, think of Spain, think of southern Portugal, the Algarve, places like that, where it's really gravelly and free draining. And of course the other thing to mention is lots of sun. So sharp drainage, lots of good drainage. Lavenders hate having wet feet, particularly after snow melt. So it's important that you plant them in a gritty, gravelly, elevated area, then give them lots of sun. And when you have them out in that, the other thing to bear in mind is they like plenty of good airflow. You see, here often we get a lot of humid weather in the summertime. That can lead to spots on the leaves, to fungal problems. So by putting them out in an open area where there's plenty of good airflow, that will help you cope with that. The other final thing I want to mention is that they like to have a soil that's on the sweet side. Alkaline soils. That's what happens in nature. If you've seen lavender plants growing in nature, often you'll see them growing in between great big chunks of limestone rock, white rock. That's the limestone. So test your soil, and if it's on the neutral or acid side of neutral, then it's important to dress the soil with lime. It's easily corrected. You just give them some lime and that helps to sweeten the soil, and they'll love you for it. And then one little cultural thing you can do is that when you buy plants like this and you plant them out and you do everything like I'm talking about, elevated sun, drainage and so on, the other thing to do is when they finish flowering, and these buds now will be flowering in another about a week or 10 days time, they'll last for 2 or 3 weeks, then they'll start to turn brown. When that happens, you go in with a pair of pruners or hedging shears and you snip off all the old flowers. That helps to keep them bushy and juvenile. You'll see all of these flowers are flowering on young, fresh growth. So by going in and trimming them back after they finish flowering, you'll then create lots of young, fresh growth that then, of course, will carry the flowers. And that also helps to stop them going woody and kind of ugly at the bottom. So a little complicated, but there's a couple of tips straight off the top of my head as to how you can grow these beautiful English lavenders. This is Lavandula Hidcote.